Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Friday with the Jocks of All Trades podcast. I am Brad, and I am joined by my really good friend, Tim. Well, you're on this side, Tim. I forget it's backwards. And we are doing another episode of Smashed Popcorn, which, if you've been around with us, our film review episode. This was our first poll winner. The man that is with me voted for this movie, and it feels appropriate to have him here for it. We will be reviewing National Treasure. Okay. Yeah, it's like the only legitimate thing that I actually worked on was for this. Anyway, yeah, so I honestly don't know where to start with this. My first note was, of course, we start the movie explaining there's a treasure. Really? I would not have thought this was a movie about treasure hunting from the title. Thanks so much, Disney, for beating us over the head with that.
Well, you got to get the background, know what it is.
That's fair. So this film came out in 2004. I think it was November 19th. I think if I have it, yeah, it's November 19th. Where was Nick Cage in his acting career at this point? Like, I know people really knew who he was, but all I can really think that he had done previous to this would have been, I think all I can think of is Raising Arizona, but I know not a lot of people have seen that movie. Let's go back and have a look here. And obviously, if anyone knows who Nick Cage is, you know he's in 10 billion movies.
Yeah, he had been around for a long time before National Treasure.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of what big movies he would have been in. And I'm scrolling through and I'm like, I don't know that I've seen any of the movies that he was in before these.
I mean, he had Honeymoon in Vegas was back in the 90s. That was a huge one.
Yeah.
The Rock.
That's true. Yep.
Leaving Las Vegas. That was a pretty big one. Con Air.
Mm-hmm.
Face Off. I always love that movie. It's so bad, but it's so. It used to air on TV all the time.
I need to watch that. I have never seen Face Off. Another note that I just kind of written because I knew it was after. That's why I was struggling, because I wanted to say Ghost Rider. We can thank Disney and National Treasure for giving us Ghost Rider, which I am positive will get reviewed on this podcast at some point. You are welcome to come back for that. That might be
our first... I love Ghost Rider.
That might I do too.
I love that movie.
Same. I do. I love it. I thought he was perfect for what they were trying to do. It was excellent. Maybe that'll be our first boozy superhero review. I'd be down for that. But yeah, he was not really, I guess, known for like super family friendly movies for the most part. From what I'm looking at. So this was different, and I don't think people knew what National Treasure was going to be originally, because the pre-hype for it coming out just seemed like a Indiana Jones knockoff at best. So I don't know what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, it gives like an Indiana Jones meets kind of bank heist movie. Yes. Which I remember when these the trailers for National Treasure were coming out. Like, I was still young. I was in, what was this, 2004? I was in like 5th grade when this came out. But I remember the trailers, and like people were excited about this movie. It just seemed like a cool concept, and again, I was 5th grade, so anything with action in it seemed cool. But I remember being genuinely excited for this movie.
Yeah, I think I love it more than I realize. But going back and watching it again at like 12 in the morning, 1 in the morning, really brought out the there are some really dumb elements to this, like some continuity stuff that just doesn't line up, like itty bitty little hiccups, but it's not like with the story, it's just like with what stuff they forgot to do. And I'm like, I'm starting to pick that out now, because we really hammered the Spider-Man movies and really picked those apart. So I guess my brain is already ready to pick out anything that wasn't spot on.
What do you think?
Huh?
What specifically are you referring to?
Okay. So it bothered me at the time. I know you're a history weirdo too. They mentioned 55 signees in the movie instead of 56, but I went and I did the research on that one, and I got to pull that up because we've got like 4 different screens pulled up for this. 55 was actually correct at the time that they would have given them the clue about the Charlotte. There it is. When they're talking about the Iron Pen, he said 55 men signed it.
Yeah.
When in reality it's 56, but that 56 signature wasn't added until 1781, and the clue was written before then. And I was like, okay, that's not that bad. Now I understand. Like, but just stuff that you wouldn't know until you do like the research for it. But just offhand, it just sounds like, oh, that's dumb.
I think with that kind of stuff, you have to keep in mind it's a Disney movie, so
it is.
I mean, they're going to keep it. I mean, it's more of a family thing. They're going to keep it a little more simple. And I mean, I love all the history elements of this movie, but I wouldn't really call it I mean, obviously, you wouldn't call it a historical movie because none of this is real.
Right.
It's sort of a history adjacent movie.
Yeah. As far as I think
you kind of have to suspend disbelief a little bit with the actual nitpicking facts on it.
That's fair. Where is it? I had another one that I wanted to kind of just like pick on just to be funny. I want to save some of that for trivia. I'll come back to it. But you're right. Overall, yes, like suspend disbelief. It is an interesting and like, okay, it's 2004. It's not like we have like really advanced technology like we do now. Like to come up with that bank heist with like really simple and like clever spy things. I looked that up too because I had to know if some of the things actually worked. You're gonna hate me for this. I wrote Charlotte's the beginning. We see Charlotte. We see that whole thing.
Yeah,
it's like where it starts. We get the Knights Templar, like the background, like, hey, like here's the whole deal. Here's what the treasure actually is.
Yeah.
And then I wrote this note, and you're gonna hate me for it. Technically, he is knighted at the beginning of the film, so he should be referred to as Sir Benjamin Franklin Gates for the rest of the film.
Well, he's not actually knighted.
I know. Here's another one. You'll hate this. Nick Cage is simultaneously the best and worst part of this movie at the same time. Best because
certain scenes with that, I will agree.
Yes.
Because when I was rewatching this last night, there's the moment right before he decides to steal the Declaration of Independence where he and Riley are standing there just staring at it. That whole dialogue he has there is so over dramatic, but at the same time, it works.
Like just because it's Nick Cage, I feel like that's the only reason it's acceptable.
And like it kind of, with his character and like the respect that he has for American history and everything, it kind of works, even though it is so cheesy and it's very over the top Nick Cage. So yeah, like I would agree. He's, depending on what mood you're in, he's either fantastic or just insane.
Yeah. So a lot of people when I was looking and I wrote my review and I was like, well, I just want to see like where other people have kind of tested the water with how they felt about this. Everyone makes fun of to save the Declaration. I have to steal the Declaration before he steals the Declaration. Was there a better workaround, or was that the only way this was ever going to happen in this film?
I mean, I think it works. Because I mean, he's right in context of the characters. Like if Ian would have gotten to the Declaration, they would have, had no regard for how it should be treated, or, they're just looking for the treasure. So, I mean, yeah, it's a Disney movie. It's kind of got cheesy plots of the, there's definitely some cheesy plot points in it, but it works.
One of the things that I loved, and I'm glad we're talking about Ian, Sean Bean, you have captured my heart since Lord of the Rings. I hated you, but realized it was a really good performance later. And then Game of Thrones, and then they killed you, and then like I could just go on. They always kill
props to Sean Bean's character for surviving the movie.
Yes, that was where I was heading with that. I was like, one of the few times he survives through a whole series or movie. Or
I mean, not to jump ahead and get into like the character. I love Sean Bean in this movie.
Yes,
like the chemistry that he had. Honestly, the chemistry between all of the characters in it is just very believable.
Mm-hmm. Oh, go ahead. I was just going to jump to something else. Go for it.
Okay.
Oh, you brought up Ian, and I love that at the very beginning, Ben's grandfather is telling him about the treasure, and he says they knew they had to make sure the treasure would never fall into the hands of the British, so they devised a series of clues and maps to its location. And then it's really funny that the whole movie parallels that about keeping the clues and treasure away from Ian.
Oh yeah,
British. I was like, oh, sure. Like that clicked for me for the first time. I was like, oh yeah. Okay.
Never thought about that.
Yeah. Not that it's like a big thing, but I just thought it was interesting enough to bring up, I guess.
Yeah.
Is it okay? Here's one of those plausible things. Yes, did I look up a lot of the stuff that gets done, like the trick with the fingerprints and like all the spy stuff and heist kind of stuff? Is it real? One of the things that they went into is it actually possible for a document to be in invisible ink on the back of a document like that's that old that we could still get to and see it? I don't know, but it's inconclusive.
Thing on that?
I don't know. I couldn't find anything. They may have, but I just didn't find it in my like very random Google search at 3 a.m.
Fair enough.
So, I gotta admit, Justin Bartha as Riley Poole is great. That was a great casting decision. That character is.
Yeah, he's great, and on like everybody in this movie is just cast so perfectly, and I think all of their performances are just you know, like there's nobody in the cat. Like if there's a scene that's just Riley or you know Nick Cage is on something else, and it's Abigail and Riley, like all of the characters can stand on their own without having some of the other characters in the scene. Like they all just give great performance. I think. You know, I think their performances are kind of what helps elevate this movie because, I mean, there's parts of it that the script is just not great. There's parts of it that feel forced, but their performances make it believable still. I noticed a few scenes.
I love writing memeable lines. There's plenty in Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, and that continues with National Treasure. Oh, yeah. Do you know what the preservation room is for? Delicious jams and jellies. I was like, oh my god! Of course they went for that. Here's where I wrote it, and I love that you said it's like a bank heist, but it also kind of reminds me of like a spy film a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's for the exact word that you use, that like heisty kind of like how are we going to do it, and showing like the cool details of like showing the vault and like them bringing down the vault and the sensors and like all that stuff was like, oh, this is really neat. Like, okay, we get to see how it's set up. I'm guessing. Here was another question I had. Speaking of heist movie and setup for that and security, do you imagine that the security got like tripled after this movie came out in like all of the places that were involved in this movie?
I don't think it would be any more than like surface level, because like I feel like those documents are probably beyond secure already. I feel like if anything after this movie, there were probably just like people getting right up to the glass trying to see if there was like secret engravings or anything that they could make out. So, you know, maybe throw an extra security guard standing nearby. But I doubt they really had to, you know, take anything in this movie seriously.
Probably not. I gotta find it. I did have it, and I don't know where it is now because I've got too many things open. Hey, by the way, the invisible ink password thing, since that's kind of where I'm at talking about the heist stuff, that actually works. About the keyboard and doing that actually works. They said the only complaint was she wouldn't have really touched the coin because of like the expense of it. Would you have touched it?
And especially her character would have known
not
to do that. But I think still, I think I don't know, maybe because it was just something that she'd always been trying to find, you know, a certain collectible. She could have just gotten excited and whatever. But yeah. But I always laugh because they talk about, you know, when they're looking at the keys that she pressed, they had the one hiccup of she pressed two of the letters twice. But like what are the odds that somebody wouldn't have like a capital letter or something in their password? So if she would have hit shift once, they would have been screwed.
Yes. Also, my favorite was the first result, a glove fry. Just that whole sequence is just so funny.
Yeah.
Also the iodine and super glue for the fingerprints, that's also real. That also works.
Oh, cool.
However, the only problem is it takes like 6 hours. But for the sake of a film, I'm so glad they didn't actually take the 6 hours and did 30 seconds. But it does work. Like I loved going through this like for the science side because there is some sciencey stuff in here, even though it's like a massively history movie. But it's just cool to know like this is feasible. Like what they did was feasible. Like yeah, suspension of disbelief, but it's nice that they put in some like realism. Like okay, how would we actually do this?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think here also. Oh, it's too early for that. I'll come back to it. Are you stealing that? It's $35. We take Visa.
Yeah, okay. I actually love that scene and like the payoff of it in the long term of the film. Because like it's just like a funny gag of he's trying to get away from Abigail and like, you know, he gets caught stealing the Declaration of Independence. But like the fact that he just happened, like he had to buy an extra copy of it aside from the one that he was stealing, and that he had to use his credit card, and like, because if he would have just run out of there, they would have, you know, caught up to Ian, and he wouldn't have been able to do the whole, you know, swapping the declarations to save Abigail's life. And it like that whole scene just has like a bigger payoff down the road for just like what seemed like a little gag.
Yeah. And what's like kind of linking on to what you said, it has two payoffs. It has a really good payoff, but it also has that like, oh crap, they know who he is now.
Yeah.
Because he used a Visa and now they can track you.
Yeah. Why they have to go to his dad's house then.
Yeah, for the silence do good letters, which here's the other science one that I looked up. Lemons and heat does not work. Lemons, the acidity and the pH balance would have actually gotten rid of any ink that would have been there. However, heat works. Heat does bring out faded lettering and stuff that would have been there. So it was like halfway right, but they said you would need some kind of agent to add with the heat to make it show up, but just not like acid. So still, it was cool. I liked that. Speeding through some more. When are we going to get there? I'm hungry. This car smells weird. Just like every time he opens his mouth, I'm just like, you're saving this film one quip at a time. The Liberty Bell. Okay. So you're a PA native. I assume you've been to Philly a couple times. Probably not. I'm probably more to Pittsburgh more than Philly, but that's okay.
Yeah, I get to Philly sometimes.
So I wrote it and I have to find it again. I have too many things open at the same time, but as we keep going, I'll get rid of stuff. So the Liberty Bell that's in the movie was made of styrofoam. The actual Liberty Bell was put in a few days after the movie was shot. It's proven there's protective shades that were in the observation window where the bell was installed. And Ian is supposed to look where the shades are supposed to be if the real bell is there. But because the bell is not there, you can tell he's not really like looking at anything. I thought that was neat. But I mean, you see it and you're like, I would never have guessed that was styrofoam.
Yeah.
Let's see. Where are my notes? I lost my notes. Okay. Here's the one that I think you'll like. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yes. A sweater and a jean jacket makes Nick Cage look so much more human and normal. Sure. That's believable. Suspension of disbelief for sure. Okay. This one was cool. I don't know if you have notes on this, but I had to dig into this to see how accurate this was. Okay. So the timely shadow with the daylight saving time thing with the $100 bill. We've both have worked in financial institutions. I can't tell you how many times I've given out hundreds, but I don't exactly look on the back and be like, oh yeah, National Treasure said it's supposed to be 222 on the clock. And like no one does that. So I decided to actually look it up. It used to be 222. Then they moved it to a different number that again, is hidden in my extensive notes that I should not have. They changed it to 10:30 when they re-released The Bills in 2013. So this movie only stands in that like sliver of time before it got reprinted.
Yeah.
Which is fine. That's okay. Like this is also like a really strange like thing. The science aspect of that, like where the shadow would have fell, that changes. That would change depending on the season, right? Because of the positioning of where the sun would be. So either way, there's lots of question marks in that. But for the sake of filmmaking and what it is, it's really neat. I think it's a cool clue. And but I just, again, another one of those, like, is this feasible? Is this real? Like,
yeah. And I mean, that
we made it up.
I mean, that's every clue in this movie.
Yeah. Like half real, half not. So you're right. Like history centric, but
movie's history adjacent.
Yes. Let's see. The weird bifocals. I forgot to look that up. I don't know if you have any history on those.
I know Franklin did invent bifocals, but I don't know if they were that trippy.
Yeah. Well, knowing him and his relationship with France, they probably were. Sorry. Did Nick Cage makes weird faces. Why? Here at the Wall was interesting. I didn't get a chance to research that either because there's just too many things to research after a while, so I'm not going to. But I'm trying to think of where I want to go next with this, so I don't know if you have any comments that you've wanted to add that I've kind of just bullied through. Go for it.
I mean, the here at the Wall thing leads them to the church where the vault is.
Yeah.
Again, very unlikely that there'd be like a bottomless pit in the middle of the city,
right?
That nobody would have ever accounted for, in like developing all the buildings around it. They do like geological tests and stuff. So again, a lot of things that are kind of very unrealistic, but still entertaining.
Yes, I agree.
Which is the point of a movie. So
yeah, that's true. I remember as a kid being super confused with the beneath Parkington Lane thing, and like even though there's like a street in the church, I'm like, did it used to be like a street before the church? I feel like this was like my first like big, I guess besides like Lord of the Rings, like with skeletons and stuff, and it didn't really freak me out because I was like, oh, it's funny, ha 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 ha, he fell out of the bottom. Like, it was a very campy approach, but I like it. Chandelier and the stair scene. That was interesting. That felt very Indiana Jones to me. Very like Temple of Doom when the bridge gets cut. And like they got to climb, like that's what that felt like to me. I don't know if
then you get obviously the only two people who fall to the bottom of the bottomless pit are the two like nameless henchmen, and everyone else just like lands on their feet.
And we never see them again. Like even when they get to the bottom, it's just like, oh, who knows? They just disappeared.
I mean, it's a Disney movie. They can't just be like, oh, they're dead.
There's a dead body. Yeah,
they're gone. It's fine.
Not quite as saucy as the pirate. Oh, you're coming on for the pirate films. We need to review the pirate films together.
I just watched those last week.
I need to. Again, it's been a minute. For those that don't know, sorry, Tim. Tim and I used to quote all the bloopers for the Pirates movies in high school, and I'm still sure that I could quote quite a number of them. Anyways, still, which means we definitely have to review this together.
Oh yeah.
The next clue, I liked that. That was an interesting tie into something. With Paul Revere and Thomas Newton, who would have hung the stuff in the North Church in Boston.
Yeah. And I mean that was the clue that he just made up.
Yeah, so, I was like, that's clever. Like,
yeah, because it's believable for his character, and very quick thinking.
I love that through the eye thing came back with like literally going behind the wall that had the eye in it.
Oh yeah.
Okay, I like that. Ben gets redemption for family. Oh, look, the treasure. Surprise. Did we think we were going to get out of this without a treasure? Like, even when they're stuck in the, like, the treasure's gone, I'm like, where's the treasure?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think anyone believed we're not going to see a treasure with the name treasure in the film.
Yeah.
I have to laugh at a couple things here. So look, stairs. He does the final deal with the FBI agent Sandusky or something. I don't remember. That's probably not a good name to bring up.
Not Sandusky, but close to that.
Right. He gets amnesty for everybody. Everybody gets what they want. Turns out the FBI guy was a Mason. So here was my whole thought. Did he know where it was?
I don't know. The whole thing with him being a Mason, just conveniently at the very end, I always thought felt pretty forced.
Yes. Yep. Because I was like, why would he stop him? Well, I mean, it makes sense why he would stop him, but once he realized he's not like that guy.
It was just, that's why it just felt very convenient at the end that the guy in charge was just like, well, I got to arrest somebody. Because, like, clearly Nick Cage's character should have been arrested. But, like, the fact that he's a Mason, so he's sympathetic, and he's like, well, I got to arrest somebody, and they send him right to Ian. Like, it was just very, again, it's a campy Disney movie, so it's going to happen. But that felt a lot of the film to me, a lot of it does feel believable, even though it's a completely fake and unrealistic story. A lot of the scenes make it feel like, okay, it makes sense that, they find the perfect time that they can steal the document. Some of the things that they're doing to get to the document make sense. Like, the clues make sense in context with history, but like, then there's just some stuff that's just so forced that it's like, you could have done that better.
Yes. I love that he went all Godfather on us at the end, by the way, to let us know he's a Mason. He's just sitting there like, somebody's got to go to jail. I wonder who it's like. The whole time he's playing with his ring, I'm like,
I thought about it. Like, I went back to like some of the earlier scenes, like when they're at the gala and he's speaking to try and see if he was wearing the ring, but you can't really make out his hands. So
I wonder if that's intentional.
Yeah. Or that's just.
Well, and I say that because the original rough cut for the film was 4 hours long.
Oh.
It's like, oh, wow. Okay. And I think it's 2 hours and 15 minutes, 2 hours and 11 minutes, somewhere in there.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like the pacing of this movie.
Huh?
I like the pacing of this movie.
I do too. It's not where you're sitting there like, something needs to happen, but it's also not like, wow, that was a lot that felt forced. Like, there's stuff that like plot line feels forced, but it's not like, hey, hurry up and get where we want you to go.
Yeah.
So Ian gets arrested in Boston, but I have to laugh. It's the most Nick Cage into a movie ever. He just steps out of the shadows like a superhero and just stares at him. I'm like, yeah. Wouldn't you have wanted to be part of the bus? Like, you literally waited for Ian to look around just to be like, it's very Fast and Furious.
Like, that felt satisfying though.
Oh my gosh. So then Riley gets the car. Ben and Abigail end up together. I don't know. Like, I've been around this movie for a long time. So have you. I've watched it more times than I can count. But I still have to ask, what personally did you like about this film? I know you've kind of talked about it a little bit, but something maybe.
I just think it's a unique idea for a movie. It combines elements of different genres of movie that I already like. And I when I first went to college, my plan was to be a history major. Like, I love history. So this just ties in, and even though it's loosely based on history and there's elements that are very unrealistic, like, it's a Disney movie. It's fun. And like, this is one of those movies, like, it gets memed a lot, but anytime it's on TV or I'm like sitting like scrolling through Netflix and it pops up, like, yeah, I'll watch National Treasure. Let's go.
Yeah, I don't think there's ever a time that I'll just
enjoyable movie.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen it or like skipped, like gone past it in like Disney Plus and gone, oh, I could watch that. And I've never just gone like, eh.
Yeah.
Like, I always end up watching it, and then I always end up watching the second one, which, spoiler, if people didn't know there was a second movie of that, there is.
Yeah.
But yeah. Okay. So I have to agree with you. Like the history aspect, like kind of like how it would be, like it's feasible. We don't know enough about like everything that happened. There could have been a missing treasure. Could be. Who knows?
Yeah. And honestly,
but like
at the same time too, like it has those history elements, and I think a side effect of that is people get interested in it. Like I remember when I first saw this movie, I was in 5th grade, and after that I had like a whole new fascination with the American Revolution, and like was reading about it and stuff. Just at the time I was like, maybe there is treasure, because I'm 12 years old, but it was still, it got me to start learning about things.
Yeah. So you would say this had the Hamilton effect, because I know when Hamilton came out, that's what everybody started doing.
Yeah, like in a different direction, but yeah, definitely.
I like that. So what didn't you like about this film?
I mean, like I said, as you're going through the movie, bearing in mind that it's a whole fictional concept, whatever, there's just a lot of the progression and a lot of the clues and stuff and the history tie-ins feel very believable, but then you'll get to something that is just out of place and feels forced. And those moments really, interrupt the experience for me a little bit, but it's nothing that I can't just get past and be like, whatever. It's just entertainment. You got to progress the plot, and it's all fake. So,
yes. So I have to enjoy this? There was a romance that occurred the whole time.
Yeah.
But it didn't feel like it detracted from the action and the story and everything happening. It just came of its own. It wasn't forced. It wasn't like some of the Spider-Man films. Like it just feels, we said this, it feels like that just detracts from what they could have done, because they spent so much time on Mary Jane and Peter, Mary Jane and Peter, Mary Jane and Peter. Like you could have expounded a lot more, but this didn't do that. If anything, it just let it happen. And you know what? It's probably the least annoying romance in a non-romance movie that has existed. I love it. I love it for that.
Yeah. Well, I like the dynamic between Ben and Abigail, because they have very similar interests. They're both fascinated and passionate about American history. And like, if they would have met on any other terms, like I feel like we would have seen their relationship bud a lot faster. But because they had this conflict of him stealing the Declaration of Independence and her trying to protect it, like it just took them a while to get on the same page. But like, they're just very similar characters, and you like early on you're like, oh yeah, there's chemistry here, even though they're against each other at first to an extent.
There's only really two things I don't like. Like I told you, Nick Cage is both the best and worst part of this movie. There's just sometimes Nick Cage is Nick Cage, and pulls me out of that story. But then there's times where he's Ben Gates, and I'm like, okay, I'm in. Let's just get it. Let's go. What do you got to do now? You got to save your family name.
Yeah.
And the second part, that like you said, you're a history person. I love history. If I didn't know where some of these places were, I wouldn't know where we were all the time.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Because they go from Washington, D.C. to Philadelphia, Boston, New York. Like they jump around quite a bit.
Yep.
And I remember when I first saw the movie as a kid being confused by that as well. I just figured I was 12 and didn't know, but I can definitely see that.
Mm-hmm. It's because like a lot of movies at that time,
of like 2 days or something. So
and a lot of movies in that time would have put like, we've seen it before, like the white text at the bottom of like New York with a time and a date or whatever, like something like that, like anything would have been helpful.
Yeah. One thing I'm glad, because 2004, as far as like other films of that era, that was big in like the shaky cam style of filming. Very glad they didn't go that route with this movie.
Yes, thank God. That would have been so bad.
Yeah.
Seeing Nick Cage running with the Declaration going.
Yeah.
Would have just like.
Because there's a lot of the cinematography in this movie, like when a lot of the establishing shots at the beginning of the scene, like big, pans of Washington, D.C. or like the Arctic when they're up at the Charlotte, or there's a lot of just really great shots in this movie.
I agree with that. It is, and I said that it's kind of a pretty movie. Like, because you think history, a lot of people think like old dilapidated buildings and like boring. It didn't do that. It showed it in like a really, really good light, like you said, that made people want to go and say, "Ooh, I want to know about that. Ooh, I've never been there.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, I
What
think
is it?"
It brought up a lot of interest because it was a story of the American Revolution, but not a story about the war.
Yes.
So it kind of got you interested in other aspects of history that you might not have ever really learned about.
Which makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna give us some trivia that I saved. I don't know if you have any interesting trivia, and then we will rate the film, and then we'll wrap up. I thought this was cool, and I had to go back and look at it. Benjamin Franklin Gates, Patrick Henry Gates, and John Adams Gates are the names. Obviously, we know those are all three founding fathers. Benjamin Franklin, we know what he's famous for. John Adams and Patrick Henry, I think, was "Give Me Liberty, Give Me Death." I think. I really have to check that. I don't actually know. Abigail Chase is interesting because it's a combination of Abigail Adams, which is John's wife, and Samuel Chase, a signer of the Declaration of Independence. So they like really tried to like fully submerge you into the, hey, we're doing history now. And I kind of like that. I was like, okay. Speaking of those like dumb things that occur in a movie, yes, I know suspension of disbelief is what I'm going to be told. But okay. So Ben Gates is wearing a Rolex Submariner diver's watch, which values at $8,550, right? He uses it as collateral for $100 bill. Like, sir.
He just wanted that $100 bill.
Apparently. I was like, no, that's so bad.
He had to prove a point.
A very expensive.
Although I love that moment that Riley gets there where he's just like, is this how you two feel all the time?
Which obviously Pass and Stowe referring to the Liberty Bell. I hate it when you guys do that.
Yeah.
There's a Weird Al reference in the movie. Do you know where it is?
Oh, no.
At the beginning, Gates, when Ben is trying to figure out the first clue, Shaw says it's prison. Then Riley says Albuquerque. See, I can do it too. Snorkel. It's a reference to the 1998 Weird Al song Albuquerque, which talks about a man's journey to Albuquerque to retrieve his lucky snorkel. I never knew that. And I was like, oh my God, that's funny. He's right.
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah. Apparently that line was also ad-libbed.
Oh, yeah.
I was like, oh, that's clever. I like it. This one just makes me laugh because I noticed it this time and I had to write it. The length and existence of Riley's goatee changes throughout the movie. It goes from long to like really like skinny to like very, very, very gone and then back again. And like, yeah, go back. I was looking at it. I was like, I know when your production.
Yeah, I want to watch that because the movie is only like a couple of days.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, I was like, I know when your production times were and when you film stuff together. Here's one I thought was interesting because they gave, like, Ian was smart in his own way in this film. But it's interesting that he was able to figure out that silence was a proper noun because it was capitalized. Because if you look at the Silence Dogood letters, a lot of things were capitalized in that time period, whether it was a proper noun or not. So it was a massive leap for Ian. I was like, good for you. Like, I'm surprised you got that. That's all I have. I sprinkled some. Oh, no, wait, I lied. I have one more. So when Ben and Riley are sitting in front of the Lincoln Memorial Monument, where he's sitting like, you could steal this guy, you could do that. And they're like, the Washington Monument is in the background. The water was actually drained from the pool at that time when they filmed. So they digitally added the water. I'm like, you couldn't have just filmed on a different day? Like, you know how much work that is for somebody to go back and digitally, and you have to add the shadow of the monument.
How expensive having an extra day of filming is?
Yeah, well, that's fair. But that's all I have. Did you have anything?
I just had one fun fact that I read.
Go for it.
It's not even really about the movie. It's just that Nicolas Cage and Diane Kruger used to love going out for karaoke together while they were filming this. And Nick Cage would sing
in
like
character or just in general?
Just for fun. Nick Cage would sing like AC/DC or like Sex Pistols and stuff.
Why didn't they film that? Was probably in the 4-hour cut. You know what? Some of that was probably in the 4-hour cut, and they got left on the production floor. I can picture it, and I think that's what's the most upsetting.
Nick Cage had to get up and sing like Back in Black to distract the FBI.
That drives me nuts. Okay, so we've talked about the film. We both like the film. But is this a I have to watch it every day kind of film? Is this somebody should have got fired for this film? Where would you rank this film?
I'd give it a 7. I mean, it's not the best movie, but it's fun. It's got some interesting plot points. It combines a lot of different styles of movie, and I think it does it pretty well overall. It's not a movie that it's not the top of my list of things when I'm trying to decide what I want to watch, but it's one of those, if I just randomly think of it or if it pops up on Disney Plus, I'll be like, you know what? Yeah, I'll watch that right now. Like, I've never disliked watching National Treasure, and I've probably seen this a dozen times.
So many times.
It's just a fun movie, and it's
I like it.
For the time it was kind of something different for Disney.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember seeing it in theaters as a kid, and I loved it then, and I still love it. I think it holds up.
It is. It's a good film. So that would give you the Ruby Slippers Award. So you'd have it on your shelf and watch it again. But I thought just for the theming of this show, I made a special award just for you when I knew it was going to be you and me. You will be giving it the I'm going to steal the Declaration of Independence Award this evening. For the viewing of this movie.
All right, well, here, let's go ahead and
where is it? Does he have it? I knew it was coming.
I stole the Declaration of
Independence. So I want you to know it's eerie because I actually rated this a 7.4. And I only gave it that because I took some points off for some just like goofy things that were in there, not because it shouldn't be goofy, but just like stuff that's like okay. But it holds up. I like it. I've never passed up on it. Is it in game? No, but it's still enjoyable. It's one of those just like non-stressful fun films you just put on when you're like, I want to watch something but I don't know what I want to watch. Instead of going through the watch list of films I haven't seen, I'll just go to National Treasure or something like that. So
you're not watching Pulp Fiction. You're watching National Treasure.
National Treasure. That's right. So I will also give it the Ruby Slippers, which is technically for this evening the I'm going to steal the Declaration of Independence Award. So yeah, bring it back out. Let me put it back up. Oh no. Okay.
Oh, here, what's that?
Leave it up in the back. That's good. Do you have any final notes on this film? Things people should know if they're going to launch into it, maybe for the first time? Maybe, I haven't watched it in a long time. Why should I pick it up and watch it?
I might be totally off base on this just because this is a movie that I liked as a kid, so I just have some nostalgia for it. But this is one of my favorite Nick Cage roles. I think he's great in this movie. I think I think the character is well written for him. I think he fits it well. And like I said earlier, like a lot of the over dramatic Nick Cage acting that he sometimes does in some of his story, I think it works for this character.
Yeah.
So he's believable the entire film, and like I'm totally on board with him as Ben Gates the entire time. Like it's just a great part for him, and one of my favorites that I've seen him in.
So this might be a little spoilery, but okay, if you had to pick one of these two films of Nick Cage just for like, your character and like how they wrote it for you was excellent, National Treasure or Ghost Rider? I have to know. Treasure. Oh, okay. See, yeah. I would take Ghost Rider, and I think maybe that's just because I'm a Marvel nut, but I don't know.
Yeah, No, I do enjoy Ghost Rider, but I think this particular role was just better suited to him. And I do like him in Ghost Rider. I'm not trying to make it sound like I don't.
No, that's fair.
That is the consensus if those movies are, kind of awful.
Right. I didn't know like if you had to pick one of the two, so it would be
definitely pick that.
I'm so glad we didn't get like Vin Diesel or something else for this. Like, as much as I make fun of Nick Cage, like I'm glad it was Nick Cage and not like Dwayne the Rock Johnson or Vin Diesel or like, you know what I mean? Like, it just wouldn't be the same.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to he's just become so iconic with this role, and partially just because of memes and stuff that have come out of it. But like, you really can't imagine anybody else playing this part.
No, and that's the crazy thing about it. Like, for all the criticism that I give it, he's still perfect for it.
Yeah. The entire cast too. I mean, it's just such a well cast movie, and everybody in it works so well together.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thanks for watching with us, guys. That is our review of National Treasure. Next week, we will have a surprise. We are waiting for our final results for our Jack Black Attack poll. If you have not voted for that, jump in and vote. I'll tell you in a second because you're making a face. I have a guest lined up for that, but Tim, you're more than welcome to come for that also. The more the merrier, because it's Jack Black and we'll have plenty of things to talk about. With that being said, thanks for hanging out with us tonight, guys. Thank you, Tim, for coming and recording with me.
Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday.
Happy Friday. I love Friday.
Me too.
Get down on Friday.
Gosh. All right, we'll see you guys.